Good morning, everybody. This is Tom Nowakowski with Adjusters247.com. We're going to go ahead and get started with our broadcast of this weekend's webinar. I hope everybody can see my screen okay. Just to let you know, if you hear some background construction noise, that's upstairs, and not much I can do about it. So you might hear some drilling going on every once in a while in the background, and I apologize for that. But I do thank you for being here with us this morning. Today, what I'm going to do is give you some information about Adjusters247.com, and also we're going to be discussing the ordinance or law issue coverage and the 25% rule. And so I'm going to go and get things going, and if you have any questions at all, you can use the question box that is in your screen from GoToWebinar, or you can raise your hand if you have a quick question, but feel free to offer any comments or suggestions as we go along. As I said, thanks for being here today and being part of the Adjusters 24/7 team. We're going to discuss this past week's podcasts. We covered a lot of material, and if you had any opportunity to listen to the podcasts and you have questions about any of the material that we went over, we're going to discuss that. We're also going to discuss how we do what we do and why we do it. We're going to go over the many ways that we share our message with our people. We'll also explain what our future plans are and how you can be a part of those. We're going to review material plan to be discussed next week, and then we're going to talk about anything that you want to talk about. And then, like I said, we're going to have the training segment on ordinance or law and the 25% rule. And I have some examples of that I'll share with you as well. And then we'll just have a general Q&A session at the end. So if you do think of anything that you want to discuss or anything that you want to bring up as a future topic, just let me know. We'll have plenty of time to go over that. Here's the agenda for today's webinar. We're going to start off with an overview. We're going to go into the podcast information and how you can listen to and download the podcast, all the different ways that we do that. Also, we're going to review the podcast and the different websites that you can gain access to just by clicking on the buttons on the blog post that we send out as soon as the podcast has been published. We're also going to review the social media involvement that we have, the email requests for information that you may have, the training segment like I talked about, and then we'll go through all of the questions and answers. And as I said, if you have a question at any time, feel free to type it into the box there, and I'll be watching for those as we go along. First, here's an overview of Adjusters247.com and what we do and why we do it. Basically, we're dedicated to providing claim professionals the information they need to be more efficient and proficient. And what I mean by that is I've been in the business for 32 years, and I know there's nothing more frustrating than not being able to get an answer to a question when you need something. And most of us, that's the reason for the 24/7. You know, if you're an adjuster, you know, we don't have normal hours. You know, we are adjusters 24/7, and you know, it's nothing special to be working at midnight. And if you've got a question about some possible problem that you're having, or if you've got a claim that you're working on and you need some advice on, we're going to be available for that. And that's along with the podcasts that we do every day and these weekly webinars. We're going to be creating a more efficient and proficient adjuster regardless of who you're working for. But if you decide to you know, get on the roster of one of our sponsors, or Action Catastrophe Team for one, or somebody else, you're going to have a golden opportunity to show how knowledgeable you are on certain topics. That's just going to help you along the way. And we're going to discuss here in a minute our formatting, but regardless of the position or level of experience, the material that we discuss in each podcast will help all of us be better in our everyday lives. And it starts, all that information is at our website. And I hope everybody's had a chance to go to the website. If you haven't, it is loaded with information. This is, the website that you would bring up just by going to www.adjusters247.com. We list a lot of different information in here that will help help you, and we're going to be expanding this greatly over the next couple of weeks. But everything that we talk about in the segments, in the podcasts, you can download the podcast straight from the homepage here. And I'm going to go over these a little bit more. There's also going to be a schedule of what's coming up the next week, so that you can go and see what we have scheduled there. And also recent blog posts. I send a blog post out every day, just letting everybody know that the podcast has been published and where they can go to get it. There's also a lot of information here about what we do that you can get access to and review at your leisure. I'm not going to read it to you today. There's also an opportunity here to send us a message on the Contact Us screen, whether it's a suggestion for a future podcast, or if you have a question about anything that you're working on at that moment. And I'm going to give you some more contact information at the end of our session. But if you're working on something, you've got a quick question, or you need some advice on something, all you have to do is just type us a message. There's no charge for any of this. It's all free. It's all part of this, of being in the adjusting fraternity. There's no catch. I'm not going to drop a bunch of sales calls on you or anything. It's all so that we can go and share information, and somewhere down the line, it'll end up where we will either have you as part of our Adjusters 24/7 team and knowledgeable about the different ways that we do things, or that you'll be part of either Action Catastrophe Team or one of the other sponsors that we have, and they'll know that they'll be getting a quality adjuster who really cares about the education that they get. And as I've always said, there's, even with my years of experience, I learn something new every day. So this business is ever changing. Policies change. We have coverage that changes. Technology changes, and we want to make sure that everybody keeps up with it. Now, the most important thing that we try to concentrate on in the podcast is making sure that we have a little bit of something for everybody, regardless of their skill level, regardless of whether they're in liability, property, casualty. We have listeners to the podcast that are in clerical, all the way up to executives for major carriers. And what we do is we concentrate on the systematic format that we use, and it starts off with the introduction, where I'll tell everybody about the Adjusters 24/7 and what we do, and then the show's guest list for that day. Then I always start off with the severe weather update with storm reports from around the country. Now, part of that is, over the last couple of weeks, last weekend we had a major ice storm that came through the central part of the country from Texas to Ohio, and this weekend there's severe weather that's happening. In fact, I just checked it a little while ago. Right now, in the Gulf states, including Texas and Louisiana, and so we've been focusing on that and preparing for that. In our storm update, we keep everybody up to date. What I do is I get the absolute latest information, being a recorded podcast, which comes out at somewhere between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning from the severe websites that I am members of. And then I include that into our show notes for that day. And then I record the podcast, do all the production, and upload it. So you're getting, when you see that come in, that blog notice come in that that the podcast is available for download, you're getting the most up-to-date storm, severe weather that there was, that morning. So it's not old information that we deal with at all. And then we move into storm tips in our catastrophe operations segment, where we discuss current deployments. This is where we also discuss pre and post storm advice, so that you can go and know what to prepare for. If you've never been out in the field before, it's a totally different animal after a cat. I covered that in one of our podcasts this week. In fact, in the fifth segment, the Adjusting 101 segment, we offer guidance for the newer adjusters, or as refreshers for those that haven't been in the field for a while. And what we do is make sure that it's all current and pertinent information to whatever's going on right now. If we've got a threat of severe weather, I'm going to focus on getting ready for having to deploy for that storm that might occur, and where you might have to go, and the things that you'll need to work the different types of claims. Last week we had it could have been either ice or tornado or snow. This week it's mostly hail, wind, and so we give everybody an idea of what to expect when they get out there on a storm. I skipped over number 4, but we go through the claim industry news, and this is all topical information that deals with various types of insurance. It could be liability one day, it could be property the next. We go from inland marine to all of the different types of insurance, with whatever is happening at the moment and whatever people are going to need to have some information on. I take that from certain areas that I'm members of and different groups, and so whenever the executives, or whenever there's a claim industry topic that's going on, I try to share that with everybody in our daily podcast. After the Adjusting 101 segment, I go and talk to the seasoned adjusters, the ones that have been around for a while, like me. As I said, there's all kinds of changes that happen in this business, and they happen whether we like it or not. When you get a lot of experience, it's tough for some of those adjusters to change with the times, and so they end up getting left behind as a result of it. What I try to do is bring in either policy or technology, computer, whatever, that I can share with the seasoned adjusters to keep them up to date and current with what's going on in the industry. And again, this goes through all of the various types of insurance coverage that's available out there. It could be liability or catastrophe or daily claims. It could be anything, commercial, residential. I try to cover a little bit of everything every day, and definitely different topics every week for each segment. Now, we are going to have a 2-day series in the seasoned adjuster section starting on Monday, dealing with third-party liability claims. And there will be different series this week that you might want to be interested in as well. And I always will include those in the blogs that I'll show you here in just a little bit, so that you'll know what's in these podcasts when we do produce them, and you can go and see the information that was covered that day. Then we go to the time management and organizational tips and tricks for managers and staff. We also include in this section, different ways of stress management that can be utilized that just helps with productivity in the office place and makes everybody more efficient. And that's a huge topic in retaining staff members, and so I address it towards the managers, and they can share it with their staff, but everybody can get a little something out of that segment, I think, and it is worth, I picked up a couple of organizational tips this week just on some of the material that I covered. So it isn't a good idea to listen to it, and you might be able to pick up some information from it. Then we move on to what we call the reality check segment, where we discuss different successes and setbacks that occur in this business, and a lot of them are to me personally, because I've had ups and downs, and just like everybody else who's been in the business for any length of time. But we try to share those so that people can learn from them, whether it was something that was great that happened and we want everybody to be a part of, or if it was something that was, an experience like, sleeping in my truck for 2 weeks during a storm because I had no place else to go, and basically bathed in a gas station bathroom, every day. But, those type of stories people need to be prepared for, especially those that have never been in the field before. So we try to include that in our every podcast, something that people can get some advice from. We'll also answer any questions that we receive through the many ways to contact us while we, after we do or before we do the show ending. And during that show ending, we discuss the upcoming events and any certification classes that we're going to be part of. And then, we share all of this on every social media avenue that there is out there. Now, you can listen to the podcast and download the shows, as I said, immediately after the production is completed. The podcast is published through our hosting site, which takes them, once I upload it, it takes about 10 minutes, and then it's available out there on iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play and SoundCloud and several other areas as well. You'll be able to access that through our blog post, and as I showed you in the homepage of our website, where you'll be able to just click on any one of those links, any one of those buttons, and it'll take you right to that area, right to our libraries where you can go and open everything up. When I send that post out, it'll come to you to your email address, and it basically just has every bit of information that you could imagine. And this is this last Friday, yesterday's, where I tell you that the episode has been published. I go through and I list what we discussed, and it'll all be here by the different segments in the format that we talked about. That way you'll have an idea of where some information is. You can download these, or you don't have to download them. You can keep them on their servers, and you can just go back and look at the libraries at any time to pick out a topic that you might have a question about. I also put in here how to get to the GoToWebinar that you're a part of today. But again, if there's any time that you have any questions about anything, you can always send an email to us, or you can go and get the homepage there of our website that has a lot of information right there. But as part of the blog post, I also include the links to download the podcast, access the podcast, I also have the prior podcast posts that we send out during that week, and the schedule of events that are coming up the following week. We have information on the blog about Adjusters247.com and what we do and why we do it. And then I also have a contact form here. So if you have any questions or suggestions, you can go and just from the blog post that I send out every day, you can go and enter in any kind of information here, any kind of message, topics for, or suggestions for topics for future podcasts. You would just type it in here and hit submit. All of our social media, or most of our social media, links are right here, so you could go to our Facebook page, our Google Plus page, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Snap. We're on Instagram. We're on every major site that's out there in social media. We have a presence in, and we send our information out every single day. The blog post and how people can go and access the show is included in those messages that we share on our social media. Emails and phone calls, though, from claim professionals needing guidance always take priority and are responded to immediately. And as I said, there's no charge for that. We just want to get as many people as part of the team so that we can go and make sure that you're getting the help that you need and we're providing the service, so that, whether it's actually catastrophe team or any other adjusting firm out there, you're going to be able to be more knowledgeable and more productive than some of the other adjusters that they're going to have. Now, here's a summary. By now, you should have a good idea of what Adjusters247.com does and how we do it. You should also now know all the different ways that you can listen to the podcast and how to find us. You should understand now how we communicate with the claims professionals that we know and currently have on listening to the podcast and going to our website. What we need and really what I need is for you to help us expand the number of claims professionals that we reach. We want to go and get the word out. So if you could share some of your or share an update or refer any of your claims associates that you know to our website, or let them know how to get into our webinars, I would greatly appreciate that, because we want to make sure that we're getting as many claims professionals as possible, regardless of their level of experience or their position. We want to make sure that they know where to find us and they can download the podcast and get all the information that they're going to need as well. In the future, in addition to that, we're going to be adding a lot of material, reference material, to the website. That's going to be, we already have a lot there under the different tabs, but we're going to go and add more and more over the next couple of weeks that are going to be topical. I'm going to have a section for property, and that'll be split up residential, commercial. Same thing with liability. Same thing with casualty and inland marine, working truck wrecks. There's going to be a little bit of everything. On our website, reference pages that people can go to get a quick refresher course. If you haven't handled a truck wreck claim in a while, you'll be able to go back to the podcasts last week where I went and discussed truck wrecks and how to handle those and what you needed to do about it. But these are all in the process of being done, from audio to audio-visual, where it'll be a video that'll be in our media resources section of the website. So we're going to be expanding the website, so be watching for that. And then we'll be adding other claims-related sponsors to our family in the coming months, and they're all going to be relevant. They're not going to cram anything down anybody's throat, but it's going to be a way for us to offer services to our adjusters, whether it be some additional training material or CE classes or licensing courses or whatever. Those are all in the works, and I expect to have some of those things finalized within the next few weeks, but definitely over the next few months you're going to see us expanding and expanding in a big way. We also have a lot of different things that we do, and this is the part of the program where I discuss whatever this week's training information is. And this week we're going over ordinance or law and the 25% rule. Ordinance or law, a lot of people, depending on your experience level, you may not have ever dealt with an ordinance or law claim before. But if you aren't familiar with the language in the policy, this is a standard HO3 policy that I've pulled out as a sample, and it is additional coverage, what they call additional insurance under the coverage of the homeowner's policy. It does not affect the coverage A for the dwelling. This is in addition to the amount that's available in the coverage A, but it basically says that they can use up to 10% of whatever their coverage A is for any increased costs that are due to ordinance or law. And I'm going to show you an example of a file that we handled just a few months ago down here from Hurricane Matthew. But if there is a claim that you're handling that involves code upgrades, or say the electrical panel is out of date, or the handicapped access needs to be provided, then because it was grandfathered in, and now they've got to go and do repairs, and so they're going to be forced to add that handicapped access. That's a code upgrade. That's an ordinance or law issue, and this is where the coverage would come from. That. The one thing that I want to show is, and make very sure that everybody understands, is that ordinance or law being an additional coverage, being an additional insurance, it's its own coverage. You need to, when you fill out your Xactimate and you are getting all the admin information in there, and you go and you're putting in your coverage limits for A and B and C and D, and you're listing all of those limits in there, you also have to at that point go and add a coverage for ordinance and law, and whatever the coverage amount is that pertains to that policy, that's what your coverage limit would be. Then, and I'll show you here in a minute in an estimate where it would show up, but you need to go and make sure that you do that. And keep in mind, ordinance or law, they don't get the money up front. This is all for you incur. They have to incur the damage first. They have to pay for it, basically. Some cases they can have a signed contract with a contractor who's licensed and reputable, and they will go and pay that based on the contract. But most of the times those losses have to be incurred and paid, and before we will go or the insured will go and get reimbursed for that. So keep that in mind as we go through things, because the 25% rule here in Florida is a huge issue that you'll run into if you work claims down here. And they're saying this year might be a bad hurricane year. We got spring storms coming up. We got hit with Matthew, so I wanted to show you the 25% rule just as an example of ordinance or law. The 2010 Florida Building Code changed at that point, and Chapter 6, what everybody refers to as Section 611, addresses replacing an existing roof. This is what's called the 25% rule, and it states not more than 25% of the total roof area or roof section of any existing building or structure shall be repaired, replaced, or recovered in any 12-month period unless the entire roofing system or roof section conforms to the requirements of this code. Now, this rule applies to roofs that predate March of 2002. There are some exceptions to that by county. Each county sets their own rules pertaining to the 25% rule, and you would need to check with the county building people, or when you deploy, you'll know based on the county that you're assigned in what the rules are on the 25% rule. But it does not apply to just apply to individual slopes, but rather the entire roof section. A section is defined as basically the whole roof is a section. That's not slope, that's section. And unless the roof is separated by a parapet wall or there's some separation in elevation, those roofs are all one section. And so if more than 25% of the roof is damaged, you would pay for the damaged portion, and I'm going to show you an example here in a minute, and then you would go and put the rest of it under ordinance or law. But it is important to make sure that you understand that each section, when you see the word section, that doesn't mean slope. It means by the law, that whole roof, unless it's separated by a wall or different elevation, that's going to be part of that. Also, part of that is if you take off that roof that predates 2002, you have to also allow for renailing of the decking, the roof decking that's up there. That's part of the code. So that would be a code upgrade. So you would include that in your ordinance or law section of your estimate. Also, there's felt issues. And down in Broward, Miami-Dade, and some other, I think Palm Beach as well, but definitely Miami-Dade and Broward are in what they call high-velocity hurricane zones, which means you have to have 30-pound felt on those roofs in addition to renailing the decking and everything else. They need 30 pounds of felt. Outside of the hurricane zone, just about everybody's requiring 30-pound felt anymore. All the claims that I was involved in from Matthew, from very different types of carriers and from very different types of situations in different counties, they all required 30-pound felt. So I would just get in the habit of using 30-pound felt or setting up macros. If I was setting up macros, it would be for 30-pound felt, and you could always change it to 15 if you start working for somebody that requires the 15. But in the state of Florida, I haven't seen that yet. Also, on slopes that are greater than 412, you need to, outside of the hurricane zone, they're saying that that's sufficient. But again, I would just make sure that when you review this material, you keep in mind that that is pretty much standard anymore, is the 30-pound felt underneath there. So if the roof is not up to code and the repairs breach the 25% threshold, the entire roof has to be replaced and brought up to code. However, if the entire roofing system already conforms to the code, then any percentage of the roof can be repaired. What that means is if the roof was installed after 2002, then it should already have all of these code upgrades included in it. If it doesn't have those code upgrades in there, then it can fall under the category. That was where I was saying that could be a special circumstance where we would need to go and address it with the carrier and find out what their suggestions are on that. But everything in your estimate for the roof that does not conform to the code needs to be in the ordinance or law part of the policy. In your estimate, you need to make sure that you're using that coverage section in Xactimate You can use the pull-down menu to show that to apply that to that ordinance or law coverage, and that way we can go and make sure that everybody has the information that they need when they're handling that claim to go and separate out what is not related to ordinance law and what is involved in the ordinance law section. And I'm going to show you some pictures here. These were provided to me by the insured. This was after Matthew, and it was up in the northern part of Florida, up in Edgewater. And this is what was the guy's screened enclosure. The wind got up underneath it, totally ripped it apart, and threw it on top of the rear section of the roof. The rear section of the roof, as you can see, got quite a bit of damage, and of course the fascia and the soffit and the shingles and everything that was inside of that screened enclosure, including the fans and a lot of other things, were damaged as a result. The screen enclosure came to a rest there on top of the chimney. The chimney was damaged a little bit. The stucco was. The chimney cap was blown off. It was laying in the yard. So there's a lot of different things that were affected at this house and at this roof. It was quite a mess for the insureds. But by the time I got there, things were cleaned up a little bit. And I'll show you those pictures now. This is what I rolled up on when I got there, and it included no damage basically on the front roof, the front slope of the roof. Of course, we have this is the left elevation, so still no damage there. We did have our damage up on the rear elevation of the roof that would allow us to document and justify replacing the rear section of the roof. But there was no other visible damage other than the roof was worn. It's an older roof. It had been on at least 15 years. So it was predating 2002. And so I knew when I did my inspection that being a predated roof, that ordinance or law was going to come into effect. So of course you measure the whole roof, you photograph the whole roof, you document everything. Again, this is the front slope here, and there is no damage to this roof on the front slopes whatsoever. So they wouldn't have been included in our estimate to replace. But because of the fact that the laws down here state that there was, if there was more than 25% of the roof section, which is the entire roof, that was damaged, that we would go and owe for the ordinance or law part of the policy would kick in. And this is a statement of loss that shows, as I was telling you, you set up a separate coverage for ordinance or law, and then when you put your estimates together, you are able to separate out, as we did on this one, the roof part that was not ordinance or law. This is the main level. We're replacing the rear slope, and as I put an F9 note in there, allow for the rear slope shingle replacement only. There's extensive scratch and damaged shingles present, but this is what we allowed for on our main estimate, which was the rear slope where that screen enclosure came to a rest. Then under the ordinance and law section is where we added all of the different information, and a note here that I put in said the roof has approximately 29.65 total squares. Replacing the rear slope of 8.64 squares allows for the 25% replacement code as an ordinance and law payment once incurred. Again, the key words, if the insured takes the money that that he initially gets and he just fixes that rear slope, and that's up to him. if he decides to go and get the whole roof replaced, which I suggested to him that he should, then he would get paid for everything under the ordinance and law section of the policy. You always have to make sure that you go and separate out by coverage when you're building your Xactimate admin information and putting all those things in. You know, if you have an issue with that, all you have to do is send me a message. I'll be more than happy to go and discuss it with you. But then you get into your reports or whatever you're using for that insured, and it'll go and keep everything where it needs to be, and make sure that everybody knows what's going on in that claim, so it doesn't delay any kind of payments for the insured. In your reporting, whether it's the general loss report or whatever template the carrier gives you that you're working for, this is under the repair portion of the GLR. Our estimate includes the rear slope of the roof and screened enclosure along with damaged fence and gazebo, and I went through how many squares are totally on the roof, how many were affected by the actual occurrence, and demonstrated to them that the first thing that the insured or the carrier is going to see is that that report, and they're going to look for, is there any other payments that are going to have to be made on this file before I'm able to totally close it out of my system. And addressing the ordinance or law right in your report is the way that you go and cover that and make sure that they know, and not only there, but with an F9 note in your estimate, and also your photographs, you know, all those photos that I showed you and all of the ones from the insured. You want to make sure that the insured or the carriers understand that that insured has an ordinance or law issue that they're going to be dealing with, and they need to be prepared to make an additional payment on that insured's dwelling. So that's ordinance or law. You know, if you have any questions about that at all, let me know. I'll be more than happy to discuss it with you. You have a question box there. Type something in while we're moving on, and I'll be able to, I'm more than happy to come back and answer any questions that you have. But basically, you know, topics that we plan to discuss this week include any CAT deployments that are going on as a result of the severe storms that are coming through this weekend down in the south. It's a widespread area. They go everywhere from Texas all the way up to Tennessee and North Carolina, even parts of Florida down here, even down by me where I'm at in the middle of the state, supposed to be affected tomorrow by them. But you want to make sure that you listen to the podcast on Monday with the latest information, and you know, whenever we hear of anybody that's needing some deployment or needs some people to deploy, I always make sure that I include that in the information that we get out to everybody, and you'll be able to get in touch with those people. But we're also going to be talking, like I said, about third-party liability. We got a couple of days of that. Inland marine claims, we're going to be talking a little bit about that this week. I have an interview set up with an expert who's been doing different valuations for insurance companies for over 30 years. He's going to be joining us to discuss some inland marine claims and that he's been involved in, and some suggestions for adjusters that need help if you run into a claim that involves anything that is a transportable object. If you didn't listen to the podcast that I went over this week, that was another topic that we discussed. You know, basically truck wreck, cargo, railroad, anything that is transportable. A big one is construction equipment, and builder's risk insurance, and you'll handle a bunch of these different types of claims and may not even know that it's considered inland marine, but we are going to be discussing that this week. We also have some segments planned on theft losses and fire investigations, and then any topics that I get suggestions on, I go and I include in our our different podcasts that come up during the week, and basically whatever the current events are, that'll dictate a lot of it as well. So if we get a massive tornado somewhere, and I thought I heard just before we started that I think it was Hattiesburg had a tornado that came through it today. So there may be some deployments coming up, just based on what happened in Hattiesburg today, depending on how bad that was. We also have, as I said, several interviews planned with guests this week. We're also going to do whatever we can to help Action Catastrophe Team expand getting their message out there. If you haven't been to their website yet, I would suggest you do that at your earliest convenience as well. There's a link to it on our website under the sponsors page, but I would go to the Adjuster Information Sheet tab that's up here at the top and click on it and just give them some basic information, letting them know how to get in touch with you so you can get added to their roster if they have a need for deploying people, whether due to the storms for this weekend or anything in the future. It's always good to get on everybody's roster, and I would definitely suggest you get on theirs. And then now we're at the point where I'm going to unmute everybody, give you a couple of seconds to catch your breath and see if you've got any questions. So let me get this over here. All right. Everybody, you're all unmuted, so what kind of questions do you have? Anybody? Okay. If you do end up with any questions, feel free to just type them into the box and we'll discuss them then. Since nobody did, we're going to go and move on so we don't have to listen to that background noise. Again, thank you for joining us today. I know there's a lot of ways you could spend your Saturday mornings, but we will be having another meeting every Saturday, 11 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time. We're going to cover different topics every weekend. A lot of it is going to be based on whatever is the current conditions are, and whatever suggestions I get in on what you want to hear or discuss, whether on the podcast or in the webinar. Every single one of every one of our webinars is live. You're never going to have a replay. The logon link that you use today is good for any one of our webinars. So you don't have to register over again for it through GoToWebinar. That one that you got, that you accessed us today, will be just as good next Saturday and every Saturday as it was today getting you here. All of the media resources page information is on our website, and I'm going to include a YouTube video of this broadcast on there sometime this afternoon. It takes them a couple of hours to go and process everything and get it to me. As soon as I get it, I'm going to go and include it on a website and make sure that it's there, and that you can find in the media resources page. Also, for those of you who attended today, once I get the notification from GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar that the video is ready, I'll get a link sent to me, and I will forward that to everybody that was here today so that you can go and either download it directly from the link from GoToWebinar, or you can access it from our media page, media resources page, off of the website. But I'll get those emails out to you just as soon as I get it. In case you need to get in touch with me, I'm at tom@adjusters247.com. That's tom@adjusters247.com. Or my cell phone number is 754-208-7049. Again, you'll get a copy of this video one way or another. So all this information will be there for you. It's going to be in our library so that you can access it. And we also, like I said, are going to be expanding the reference material as we move forward. And we'll be sharing all the information on that in our webinars and on our podcasts. Let me check the question box here real quick before we get going. And we don't have any current questions. I covered the ones that we did get. So we are good to go. And again, I appreciate you joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend.